Demon's Souls is a game that helped lay the groundwork for the amazing genre of Souls games and Souls-likes that exist today. But for some reason, I couldn't tell you the first thing about it. Despite being the maiden voyage for the Souls games, I don't think I've heard anything about the game. I even knew more about Dark Souls 2, which, before I played it for myself, I went out of my way to avoid. Part of it could be that any news related to it just hasn't come to the specific rock that I sleep under, but I just haven't seen much in the way of discourse about Demon's Souls like I have with the other games. But since it's now the only game from the series that I haven't played, I decided that I wanted to change all that and see what Demon's Souls is about. Starting out these games, I typically just go through the tutorial and let the game introduce itself to me. But there was one thing I learned from playing Dark Souls 2 if I learned nothing else at all, which is that half of the mechanics will never be explained to me. And sure enough, I found out that my stamina recovered faster at lower equipment loads. I found out this was in Dark Souls 2 as well after the video, and brother, I am shocked at every corner at how much that game expects you to discover. It really did inspire Elden Ring. After my preliminary investigations, I played around with mechanics for a little bit just to get a feel for them. And after finding out I can do sick tricks, I found my way to the main course of the area. This is the part of the tutorial that I've been waiting for as a Souls veteran. The chance to show how good at these games I really am. And you might not believe it. What? Shields don't always shield in this game. I had my shield up! My annoyance at my pitiful protection quickly got silenced by the pretty visuals of the Nexus. And that's when it really hits you? This game is freaking gorgeous. The faces can look a little over animated and something is definitely up with the shield hitboxes, but look at these effects! Absolutely stunning. I didn't stick around too long since I'm not much of one for introductions and I wanted to get right to decking dudes in the schnoz. But to do that, we gotta make our way to the first real area of the game. And I gotta say, nice. For a starting area, I think this might be one of my favorites in any Soulsborne game I've played. I've mentioned it before, but I'm a sucker for castle aesthetics, and some of the details of this area are so sick. Like, check this out. That's so cool! They also thought ahead with this game and referenced the future titles, like with this boulder thing that they did in Dark Souls 1. And in both games, they open up the way to an item. I don't know if by giving us the Bastard Sword, they're trying to call Oscar 1-2. Bit of a bold take from Demon's Souls here to take a swing at Dark Souls 1 like that, if I'm gonna be honest, but I ain't a drama channel. There were some other cool things to this area too, like attacking these chains got me some items, and the level loop back in on itself, which is just mwah. I love it when an area does that. Then we got to explore around a bit more and got to be on the other side of those rolling stones.
Yo, wait, that's kind of tight actually.
Then we got to stumble upon another Dark Souls 1 reference. If I didn't know any better, seeing a second reference this early? I'd almost say that these games are made by the same people or something. But now that we've gone and done pulled a lever, Actually, you know what? Play that back one more time. Now that the way to the boss is open, it's officially go time. On my way in, I also applied the fire resin since they had dudes that kept dropping them literally right outside of the boss room, and if that wasn't the devs telling me to use them in the fight, I don't know what would be. You ain't got no more homies. What now, buddy? And one for the money. After you beat the boss and get back to the Nexus, you get told to talk to the Monumental, who feels very much implied to be the giant statue, and I definitely didn't spend almost 20 minutes lost in the Nexus looking for them, only to slip off of a ledge by accident, fail to land somewhere safe, and then also fail to recover my souls and find out that I already passed by them 20 minutes ago because they're so easy to miss, definitely didn't happen. I know that they have that candle there to help make them stick out, and some may call it a skill issue because of that, but for those people, I actually have a retort. And now that I finally have the ability to level up with all of the souls I don't have, we get to go back to dealing with this bullshit. And after getting past the dragon, and a hallway full of demon dogs, and the dragon yet again, we made it to the Tower Knight. And in order to beat him, you have to attack his legs and make him fall. Then you gotta hammer that head like it's a shark. And now, I know what you might be thinking. Another Dark Souls 1 reference in my Demon Souls? They might as well just call it Dark Souls 0. But I think there could be a little more subtlety at play here. I know it sounds a lot like the Iron Golem, but this might just be an Elden Ring Golem reference instead. I can see it going either way depending on how you look at it, so it is a bit open to interpretation. But now with the Tower Knight out of the way, we're at a bit of a crossroads, because there's a wall that says I need an Archdemon Soul in order to continue, which comes from the final bosses of each area. And that means Papa's gotta go hootin'. First up on the list was the area right next to mine, which was Stonefang Tunnel. And the welcoming committee was not very welcoming. And then I came up on some dudes that are much weaker to my thrusts than my slashes, which made me think that the damage type matters a lot in this game. I never got full confirmation on that, so I just operated with a loose assumption for the rest of the game and hoped I was right. I also found out that these miners have a magician subclass, because they can just turn invisible. They're not the only ones that can pull that little Houdini stunt though. Apparently the floor can too. Oh, lucky for me, magic doesn't melt wood beams. After some science gone wrong, unlocking a shortcut, and a little bit of adventuring, I got to make my way to the horror hallway with this absolute delight. Subsequent attempts told me that the webbing it shoots makes you unable to roll, but getting hit with the fire removes the webbing. Also, the floor can become lava. So that's cool. But after I understood the fight a bit more and how to deal with each of the moves, it wasn't really that bad.
Whew. Okay. Well, that was a fight.
I'm still on the hunt for that Archdemon Soul though, so I decided to head down deeper and see what this place was really made of. And I found out it's way better than the stuff I'm made of. There were some other highlights on the way, such as slipping through small cracks.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Glowing balls of nitroglycerin. Whoa. And what should have been a sign that I was very out of my depth. And they explode too. I did find this really sick fire sword to replace my boring normal sword though. And I know what some of you might be thinking, but Vaziz, didn't you have a fire sword earlier when you attacked the flag at the shh? You don't remember that? And gaslighting isn't real. Despite all the nonsense though, I think I still might have genuinely preferred it to this next area. The Depraved Chasm has got to be one of the areas of all time. Oh wait, forgot a word. You can get two status effects in this area, Poison and Plague. And the really nice part about both of these is that they stunt your healing. I was already running thin on rations from my recently failed trip to the Has-Been Hotel, and with my limited status healing items, on top of the fact that you have to run through the entire area again each time you die, I could tell this was not going to be a good time. Luckily, it only took 9 deaths in the longest 45 minutes of my life, but we got through it. At the end, you fight the Leech Launcher, who has a special move of making their HP go up. It's not too hard to counteract once you realize that it only heals and there's no threat of attack while it's happening. But after finishing the fight, I was just glad to be done with it all if I'm being honest. But don't take my word for it. Let's see the live Vaziz reaction. Jesus Christ, that was awful. And there you have it. I also took a peek at the next area and yeah, I ain't dealing with a swamp after all that. The mental really doesn't need it right now. My healing supply was also mega mondo low, so I needed to go on a bit of a grind sesh. It wasn't very fun to do in Bloodborne, and it wasn't super fun to do here either, but at least you could get a lot of higher healing ones pretty easily, which at least made it feel a little bit better. Speaking of Bloodborne actually, this next area's got some dudes that look like they came straight from the streets of Yharnam. They also have these guys that follow you around while you explore, and they're really good at getting in your way. And I do mean really good. You have 5 seconds to move or I am annihilating every single one of you. Alright, time's up. So now that the prison was 3 inmates lighter, I got to find out how interactive the enemies are in this area.
Well, I literally couldn't move. That's so fucking bogus.
The level design of this area was also a point of note. I actually really like the idea of a prison that you need to maneuver around to find keys for to open up the next floor. It was a little rough when they introduced where you need to go like this though. Did you miss it? I did too, so don't worry. Here, let me rewind it back. Right here is where you need to go. And if it weren't for an absolute saint leaving a message, I might have never found it.
Whoa!
I initially thought that I was supposed to fall to the next floor and yeah, that wasn't it. But after getting all the way through the final floor, we get to have fun with the Iron Maidenless. And the only way to get past it is to dodge through the arrows, which sounds simple enough, but they kinda hurted. I got through it though like the absolute animal that I am. I then found this magic weirdo who said that they weren't going to cause me any harm? And who am I to say otherwise? I just left him alone and took my happy little hiney over to the big door with the boss fight. The fight was pretty simple. It was like if the Crystal Sage had stage hazards on, and then once you beat it, wait, where's the boss defeated screen? Maybe if I go out and go back in, it'll fix itself. What? Why is the... Oh, I get it. That Sly Dog pulled a fast one on me. After boss round 2, the Electric Boogaloo, I went out and took care of that liar liar pants on fire. And then we need to beat the boss one last time, and that was that. Afterwards, we got in Orlando'd up to the Upper Latria, where we started to fight the same homies that brought us up here. I'll need to watch a lore video later to figure out that one. I'm hoping that lore video will also cover what on earth this thing is, and also why it leaks so much. But after dropping down them fiendish chains, and turning the flesh pile into a flesh pancake, we got to challenge the Man-Eater. I need to stop with these, I'm actually going to get copyright striked. After wailing on the boss for a while, the game decided to make the fight plural, which is exactly what I thought it needed to. My damage was actually pretty okay and I got close to taking one down, but my issue of lack of healing items hath reared its head yet again. I decided that amidst my grinding for heals, I was going to try and expand upon my build a little, and I decided that I wanted to go with miracles. Having a heal in the pocket and the ability to head back to the Nexus whenever I wanted sounded really nice. And after getting a good amount of dat grass, some levels, and seeing possibly the cutest thing in all of Demon Souls, I thought I'd check out the last area before retrying the Man-Eater, and a very pleasant surprise awaited me.
Never in my life have I needed something so much and never known till I received it.
Redemption has been achieved. And as a reward for my endeavors, I got the Regenerator's Ring, which is insanely goated. As the name implies, it regenerates HP over time, and on top of having access to heal once I get a second slot, my quality of life will be out of this universe. I then found myself in a fight with the Adjudicator, but I had no clue what I was supposed to do in it. So then I thought, am I supposed to shoot the bird? So I shot the bird. And then I got an achievement for it.
How are you supposed to get him to fall down?
For all the people who were planning on writing a comment just to say how the Adjudicator works, don't worry, I learned you're supposed to attack the blade in his stomach, so we're all good. Now that our heal is online, and my MP recovery ring finally has use, we are cooking beyond belief. And now it's time for round 2. This game, man.
Nice.
Off a little bit of a high from the previous fight, I thought I'd check out the next area before going back to level up. And I don't think I could have chosen a worse area to do this. In here, you get invaded for your boss fight, and they get some wonky magic buff, the reach of the gods, and healing items. What in the even? I tried going human again because I wanted revenge, and all I got was this clown. A bittersweet victory. The next area has the Reapster and their gang of ghouls. And there's 2 ways to get through this area. You can do it the way that I did, where you fight every single enemy before finally getting to the Shinigami herself. Or you can do it the other way I did, with some good old-fashioned Link gameplay. Also in the area happens to be everyone's favorite scumbag, Patches. And I want to make it known right here and right now that I hate this guy. I hate the way he walks, I hate the way he talks, and if it weren't for the fact that this was my first playthrough, I'd have pushed him into this pit myself. Begrudgingly, I played ball with Patches' little charade and got dropped in the drop-in. But fortunately for me, my whole mate, Saint Urbane, is actually a man of miracles, which makes my recent vocational switch very conveniently timed. And I'm beginning to think that World 4 might just be Christmas Town, because I get another chance at redemption. After about 5 seconds of engagement, they, in typical Invader style, ran towards a group of enemies. And the only way to win that game is to not play. So I sat back for a second and waited for them to come to me, and then kind of dumpstered them if I'm being honest. But these types of invasions make you really miss the cool invaders out there. By this point in the area, I was actually feeling pretty good. I was kind of excited for what the rest of the level had to show me. That excitement quickly turned to dismay. I could go into a detailed discussion on what makes the next part of this place an awful experience, but I'll just give some quick cliff notes of the highlights.
Whoa.
Projectiles while dealing with groups of enemies is always a good time. There are platforms to fight on are something I thought the game was needing more of too, and I also felt like we had too many shortcuts in the previous levels, so I'm glad that we got rid of them in this one. Venting frustrations aside, this area actually isn't super long physically and is a lot easier to get through once you figure out how to cheese the Reapers. But those first few times through are abysmal. The boss in this section is a bit in contrast to that feel, but still a somewhat fun idea though. They're blind, so they swing around randomly and will react to stuff like you attacking them, which kind of turns the fight into a big game of tag, which is certainly a time. But after clearing that fight, I got to hook back up with Saint Urban Development and got one of the funniest spells I've ever seen, in which you teach invaders the word no. And I also got the Cure spell to heal status effects for later. I couldn't put them both on now since I only had 2 slots, but having them as an option is insanely good. Up next was the final boss of the area, which was the Storm King. With this, they decided to turn the projectile spammers from the previous parts of the area into a boss fight. And you might expect this to have sucked. But honestly, it wasn't that bad. I took a lot of them out at the start with the bow, and then I kind of went sicko mode on the big one. After that, I found a cool little house to chill in, and that kind of became my perch until I finished the fight. I unfortunately had another bird moment in which I did not know that the game expected other things of me, since arrows have been the only way to deal with these enemies so far. But it turns out, at the end of the arena, there's a... Oh, let me just clear some of the inventory for the thing. And there's the Storm Ruler! Finally, a Dark Souls 3 reference. And I checked it out, and I realized I was supposed to hit the flying dudes with my newly found Skywriting Slice. Neat! Just so I didn't feel like I missed out though, I played around with it against the respawning mobs, and I almost broke it since I used it too much.
Weapon damaged.
So I had sufficient fun with it.
Oh fuck, I forgot.
And after putting it off for so long, I decided it was time to head back to the Flame Lurker. I mean, after all this time away, fighting through different areas and bosses, we're so much stronger than we were before. Let's rapid fire everything that's different now. For one, we have some healing spells. 2, my bars are a bit bigger. And 3, my damage is the exact same. Oh my god, I actually haven't changed at all. Well, ain't nothing to do but pony up and show this Flame Lurker the old what for.
How did that hit me?
Whew, okay. That was both awful and amazing at the exact same time. Up next was this area's final boss, which is the Dragon God. And for my first interactions, I can tell that they're very friendly. I was in another situation where I didn't know exactly what the game wanted from me, and my universal problem solver wasn't solving my problem. So I had to put on my thinking cap and get my brain juice flowing. And after consulting all 3.5 of my brain cells, we came to the conclusion that I needed to make the Dragon God be friendly to the rubble blocking my way. And getting hit in the process was definitely necessary. After that, the next piece of rubble, it turns out I'm supposed to break, which I definitely didn't die trying to figure out. And then I went to shoot the harpoon guns that looked specifically designed to kill the Dragon God that said Dragon God is fully capable of destroying, but has simply chosen not to for some particular reason. Another part I'll have to figure out from the lore video. But after the gun, the game turns into Metal Gear Solid, and we have to cross the area and break the rubble without Ace Ventura over here seeing us and getting upset. Getting to the other side and feeding my chronic need to push buttons dropped the Dragon God's Crimson Chin down to a hittable height. And once I smacked it enough times, we got the clear. What's left is the part that I chose to skip out on earlier for my own mental health. It's time for the Miyazaki special, the government-mandated swamp area. This area is awful. The poison does a ton of damage, your movement is way too restricted, and only Satan himself could have designed such a level. Is what I would say if I had a bad time in this area. Except for the movement one, that one was pretty bad honestly. I want to say right out of the gate, becoming a cleric absolutely carried me for the Swamp of Sorrow. On top of finding the regenerator ring from the previous world, I could combat the environment pretty well. I had the ability to cure my poison, counteract the health loss with the regen ring, and heal back to full afterwards. This let me explore the entire area without too much struggle. My only real issue was this group of giant goblins that absolutely decimated me since I couldn't run or dodge well in the sludge. I later found out there was a spot that I could pick them off and fight them one by one, so that helped a lot. I don't want to be mistaken though, despite the comparative ease of the area for me with all the tools I'd accrued up until this point, I do not believe that I am an enjoyer of the area. Throughout the game there have been a few instances of create a problem and sell a solution, which is a game design choice I'm never too big a fan of personally. The main way this game has done it, I feel, has been in regards to range, with stuff like not being able to hit the flying manta rays in 4-1, so you don't have a persistent rain of crystal shards coming at you, not being able to hit the bodies for the items in 3-1, or here needing to shoot at the large goblins to lure them to a platform that you can fight on. There's some other examples, such as with the regenerator ring for the swamp area, and the soul form ring that gives you more HP, which like, I get, but why not make the soul form at 75% to start with instead of making me use one of my 2 ring slots on it? Or if you needed me to experience the 50% HP, just make the item persistently make my soul form at 75% while it's in my inventory? I don't know, man. But I like when my options are options, you know? When they're a choice I can make so that I can engage with the world in the capacity that suits me. When I'm forced into using these instruments, especially with equipment and item loads, they no longer feel like options, but rather constricting mandates of the experience. I don't want to sound entirely negative though, because it was fun to go around shooting stuff with my bow and using it to solve certain encounters, especially since it's not something that I normally tend to do. But feeling forced to have it and a sufficient supply of arrows on me at any given time just doesn't feel as engaging game design wise in my opinion. But on a more positive note, I did find a slug pinata that had the Moonlight Greatsword in it. And even though it's bittersweet since I finally upgraded my fire sword to more than +2 like 5 minutes ago, the ethereal soap sword beckoned me. The first major victim of our dramatic disinfectant is the Dirty Colossus. And let me tell you, they live up to that name. They kept afflicting me with these locusts that did damage over time, but I kept running behind this pillar until they wore off, so it kind of became my safe space to heal and chill for the fight. And after a marginal amount of effort, we got that scrubbed.
Nice.
Last up for this area was a Twitch streamer and her tier 3 sub, Garl Vinland. The only thing I really struggled with in this fight was the stage hazard of the plague water babies.
Ow, ow, ow. Bro!
Those things do way too much damage.
What the heck?
But the fight with Mr. Garl was a lot more of a pokey back and forth, and that made this a very interesting fight. And by interesting, I mean not very interesting at all. Hot take, I prefer the other Vinland more. After heading to his maiden, she pulls a good old fuck you, dies, and with the boss done, you might think that's all of the BS this area has to offer you. But then they decide to put the teleport in the plague water, so you are forced to get plagued whenever you teleport here. I hope whomever decided that has since gone to therapy. Now we get to head back to the start of the game where we needed to gather one of the Archdemon souls to continue. And you might be wondering, why did I gather all of them when I only needed one to open the door? And honestly, it was for the vibes. Now we gotta chase this goofball Gary out here through the map for locking that door on us 15 hours ago. Almost get soft locked because I forgot I could press the O button to vault things. Murk that key clogger absolutely sicko style. Find out we actually didn't murk him, and then get our kill stolen by this chucklefuck. I mean, give the kill to my new favorite boss in the game. Aside from the Flame Lurker, this fight has felt the most like a normal boss to me. And I gotta say, not bad. It ain't no Dark Souls 3 boss, but by and large, one of the most enjoyable in the game to me so far. It's pretty simple since there were only a few attacks, and the sword glowed to indicate when the next attack was going to happen. So that was pretty neat. Fun time overall.
Man, that was actually kind of a cool fight. I actually really liked that one.
Up next was the final area of the game, where we go to fight the famed King Allant. In order to reach him, we had to race past Big Blue. And then at the steps right before the boss, we were stopped by Ostrava of Boletaria, the son of this land's king. Throughout the game, he's told me of a sword made in counterpart to his father's, and that he's now going to give me a key so that I can use it to fight against the king. I wasn't really planning on going on a little errand right before the boss of the final area, but like, I can't not, right? I indeed couldn't not. Now that I'm all set up for my audience with the king, it's fighting time. King Allant is a very fickle creature with a very fickle moveset. In that regard, the king has clouds that come out after each attack, a grab that steals a level from you,
soul level drain,
which is crazy, and an AoE move. And he really likes that attack. Like a lot. And I do mean a lot. Other than that, it was a pretty okay fight. But I didn't notice anything particularly special happen from using the Demon Branch sword for the fight, which was a little disappointing. Unless it made him AoE more often, in which case it definitely worked. With every area now completed, it's time for us to greet the end of the game. And with it, the old one. They usher us into the final fight of Demon Souls. The climactic battle with the fate of the entire world on the line. And it's this guy.
This is King Allant? What?
Don't you understand?
Wait, was that not what I was supposed to do?
Wishes to go on.
Thy work is done.
Done?
Slayer of demons, go back above. The Nexus shall imprison thee no longer.
What?
I shall lull the old one back to slumber.
Huh?
The old one, along with the maiden, was swept back into the lulling fog. Boletaria was spared from the demons, but also lost its knowledge of the soul arts.
That was really it?
Demon Souls, from what I've been told, started out as a game that was internally considered to be a failure. As such, Miyazaki took it as an opportunity to try some crazy ideas he had, since, worst case, it was already failing anyways, so there was nothing to really lose. And it's crazy to think that that's how this all started. But there's a lot to say about Demon Souls and the differences that the remake instituted. I'll have this section broken up into 3 parts, those being about Demon Souls, the remake, and some personal thoughts, in that order. There might be some bleed between them, but all in their general place. The first thing I'm going to talk about actually kind of breaks those groups I just mentioned, but I still wanted to address it. I watched a video on the Demon Souls remake that said a lot of the changes that were made to certain designs and the world as a whole had a negative impact on the lore of the game. I'm not going to pretend that I understand any of the deeper lore implications of Demon Souls, nor what alterations to the original may imply, but if the changes made to the remake do indeed degrade upon the messages of the original, then that would be an unfortunate point of the game in my opinion. It would be cool if some of the alterations opened up new interpretations for lore that weren't previously considered, but without knowing much about it, I can't say one way or another definitively. I did want to bring it up since it sounded like one of the more contentious points of the game from what I've heard, and addressing it in some capacity felt necessary. The next thing I want to talk about is something I have a lot more of an understanding of by comparison, which is bosses. The bosses in this game felt like they all tried to be a unique subversion of the standard idea of a boss, which felt very refreshing. There's the Dragon God who needs to clear the way for you for the first half, and then becomes a stealth mission in the second half. The Fool's Idol being a boss that infinitely respawns until you leave the arena and defeat the Puppet Master that keeps reviving it. The Old Monk being another player. It was all really interesting as twists on what a boss fight could be. Even the final boss, which is typically the culmination of the journey and where the hardest challenge lies, did the same by being, well, that. I think I definitely prefer the standard type of boss fight where you learn, adapt, and grow in order to overcome it, but I respect this approach a lot as a different flavor from the others. Speaking of flavor, world tendency do be one of the biggest spices in the dish that is this game. As a starting note, I do think it's pretty wild that the most common advice I hear in regards to world tendency is to go to the Nexus and bungee jump without the cord, therefore negating anything in the way of meaningful interaction with the mechanic. My thing with it is I'm never really for hiding content or areas behind arbitrary stopgaps, whether that be consumables, a time-gated quest, or in this case, world tendency. If there was a super easy way to manipulate tendencies outside of getting someone to help you cheese it with online things, then I think it'd be a much more appealing mechanic. I personally think it'd be really cool if there was an item that flipped the tendency on a dime, and then it was just a means of having more innovative level exploration. That could have a negative impact on some other applications of world tendency though that I might not be aware of, so that recommendation comes with a bit of an asterisk. I would also be remiss to not mention anything in the way of the healing mechanic, which are the consumable grasses. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm not a huge fan of integral items being consumables since, at best, they provide a false sense of scarcity that can inhibit the experience. But having to go and grind for heals also just makes it feel like one of the worst parts of the amazing game that is Bloodborne. I understand that there's an argument for needing to do the classic get good so that you have to heal less. That just feels like a band-aid solution for callous design to me. And I think some people could interpret callous as a form of tough love in that phrasing, so to make myself more clear, I mean it as more of an unfortunate disregard. Because I think most of the people that play these games have the capacity to adapt to the circumstances due to their experience. But some people are playing these as their first ever Souls game. And simply telling them to catch up experience-wise feels like a goofy answer to me personally. But I will say that grinding for healing grass didn't feel as bad to me as Blood Vials did. And there is the notorious challenge dungeon for Blood Vials too, so I don't think either feel overly terrible within those respective contexts. But it is worth mentioning that I had the healing ring on very frequently, and honestly, being a cleric helped a ton in regards to quality of life too, so my personal experience could be a bit misguided in that regard. Also, it's wild that the grass has weight. In some regards, I get it, but also, I don't really get it. The only other thing I wanted to say before talking about remake-specific things is that this game is short. Like, surprisingly short. I finished the game in about 20 hours, and that was with playing super casually, and even spending a few hours doing a smidgen of grinding and some extra exploration. This isn't necessarily a negative, since some things could have very much have overstayed their welcome if they were dragged out further. But it was a shocking aspect of the experience for me nonetheless, so I just wanted to share it. As for remake-specific things, I'm going to start by being entirely unoriginal and repeat myself from the start of the video by saying that this game is gorgeous. Like, holy cow, this game is so pretty. Sometimes the visual effects can make it hard to see what's going on, but at least pleasantries are what blocks my eyes. And continuing the unoriginal take train, the haptic feedback for this game was nuts. Quick aside, I don't know how many people have played Astro's Playroom, but that game really opens your eyes to the capabilities of the PS5 controller. Plus, it's really fun in my opinion. And I think the controller does an amazing job with Demon's Souls 2. It's a huge immersion buff from my experience. Switching to a more functional alteration between the versions, I've been told that in the original Demon's Souls, if the player didn't have enough carrying capacity for an item, they simply wouldn't be able to pick it up. Which sounds absolutely awful. I'm glad that they changed it here so that it can simply be sent to storage, or that you can send things from your inventory back to make space for it. From a gameplay standpoint, I'd rather have the system abolished as a whole personally, but with it being a remake and wanting to stay true to the original game, I think that this was probably the best answer. After having played all of the games now, I can say that Demon's Souls probably leans towards the bottom of the pack for me personally. I put it above Dark Souls 2 since I like the combat more, and that's my biggest factor with these types of games. And otherwise, I didn't feel like a lot of the experience resonated with me super hard. And that's perfectly okay, because each game speaks to different people. And I think that that's something that I don't see people talk about enough in regards to these games, which is that From Software always tries to take a new direction with each title by focusing on different qualities of the experience. Every game has some form of similar aspects in regards to each other, such as with bosses, level design, and so on, but I feel like none of them try to directly compete with one another. They more so focus on honing in on their respective strengths, and that begets each game feeling like its own unique adventure that stands out from the rest of the series. That's why I think that even if we get a Bloodborne 2, a Sekiro 2, or even an Elden Ring 2, they could be sufficiently distinct from the originals, despite likely being very informed by their predecessors. And that can make it feel a little bittersweet, since that means we might never get more of what we love most in the series, but at least for me, it helps me to appreciate what we have now. Like, I know I'm probably never getting a Dark Souls 3 2, well, outside of the goated community at least, but that helps me to appreciate having Dark Souls 3 all the more. Just like it makes me appreciate having all of the games so that more people can have a title that they gravitate towards and an experience that speaks to them. That was a little bit of a side tangent, but it's part of the reason why, even though I wouldn't say I love the game, I still respect it and value it for existing. Not only did Demon's Souls pave the way for all of the future games to come, but there are people who still find Demon's Souls to be their favorite to this day. And even though I find my home elsewhere in that regard, I realize that that's one of the best things about the series. Each game is amazing for its own unique set of enjoyable qualities. And I think that's sick.